Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to give it a few minutes as people trickle in. Well, as we wait for more people to join, let us know where you guys are calling us from. I'm in my apartment in Brooklyn, in New York. The weather is beautiful here today. My colleagues, Whitney and Rachel, are both in Denver. Hopefully, it's as bright as it is in New York for you guys. It would be nice to see where others are today. Portugal, welcome, Renata. Bright and sunny. Nice. We have Seattle, we have the UK. Perfect. Seattle's rainy today, Matt, huh? All right, I'm still gonna shocking. We'll wait a little bit more before we start, just a few more minutes. Bulgaria, welcome, guys. I love the international presence. We have London. This is great. All right. Well, it is five past, and we have a lot to cover today. So I'm going to kick us off. Um, It's great to see participants from everywhere today. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to go through the webinar, but please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them at the end. I'm going to kick us off with a round of introductions. My name is Nadine Rashid. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at Fitwel, and I'm going to be moderating this conversation, joined by two of my colleagues representing two different aspects of our work. We have Rachel Seco, the Director of Standard Development, and Whitney Nielsen, our Director of Client Engagement. Welcome both. Thank you for joining us. Um, so in our last webinar, we talked about the process of developing the V3 standard and the update. We talked about the research behind the strategies and the new strategies that were introduced into the scorecard. We also discussed and showcased the new platform design. You can scan the QR code that you see on the screen here today in case you missed the webinar. Um, and today we are going to build on the previous conversation and dig deeper into the platform features, guiding you through how the V3 Smart Scorecard makes your process of using and implementing Fitwel more streamlined and efficient, from registration through documentation and certification. Additionally, we are going to introduce Fitwel social performance, which we've talked about before in previous conversations. In case you don't know it, this is Fitwel's latest approach for implementation at scale. It connects key aspects of health and well-being to the built environment, in the built environment to value and risk mitigation. We're going to talk about how FSB can help you effectively benchmark and improve your projects, and improve the project's social impact alongside other ESG goals, while doing all of that at scale. But before we dig into the meat of this conversation and this webinar, let's start with a brief recap about why we really embarked on the V3 update. I'm going to start with you, Rachel. Can you recap the key areas of the V3 update that you find most valuable for our users? And please share a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. Thanks, Nadine. As Nadine mentioned, I'm Rachel Seco. I'm the Director of Standard Development. Many of you have probably heard from me throughout these V3 webinars, as the standard team is responsible for writing the standard, and we work closely with our research team and our industry partners to translate the evidence into implementable strategies. Just a little bit of background for a refresh. We regularly evolve the Fitwel standard to make sure that it reflects the most recent research and evidence, that it's responsive to input and insights from our users, and that it's optimized for resiliency, impact, and value. And the last time we put out a new standard was in 2019 with V2.1. And so 2024 was a big year since we put out V3, which we've been working on for the last 3 years. And so with this update, we included new strategies addressing emerging trends, connecting building health to sustainability, with a focus on climate resilience, biodiversity, equity. We worked on content alignment and clarity to make it easier for our users to streamline the implementation of strategies across their portfolios, and making sure that the content was aligned across scorecards to improve that consistency and clarity of the requirements and compliance documentation. And then with the content structure, we improved the implementation guidance and paired the compliance documentation and the requirements together to make sure everyone knew exactly what pieces are needed. We expanded scorecard applicability, making a new solution for multi-tenant buildings for those without on-site management, and then updated our resources and tools, some of which we'll dig into more today, in addition to what we're really here to talk about, which are a lot of the tech enhancements, which is our focus today. So I wanted to pull in Whitney to get her perspective as someone who's very much in touch with our client needs and market demand, to hear from her about, Whitney, what do you see this update as, how it adds value to our users when pursuing certification? And can you share a little bit more about your role for context before you dig into that?
Yes, of course, happy to. So I am Whitney, and I've been with the Center for Active Design for about 4 years now, and I'm currently the Director of Client Engagement. As part of my role, I oversee the champion programs as well as the relationship management team that supports the partners that we work with who commit to use Fitwel at scale. So to answer your question, there is a lot of value in these V3 updates, and I'll touch on what we've heard from our clients specifically. So these new strategies that you just introduced, Rachel, touched on and address market demand and align with ESG reporting standards, including GRESB, which we have found is very important for a lot of our users. So this integration helps users to receive full GRESB points for their 2025 submissions, helping them meet their sustainability goals year over year. This streamlined submission process allows for a quicker and more efficient submission of certification materials, which helps cut time down on the entire process. Additionally, we've added these input fields for performance strategies, which allow our users to track compliance a lot more easily and reach more accurate outcomes a lot faster. And as for expanding the scorecard applicability and enhancing the structure, this is extremely valuable for streamlining the implementation of Fitwel across portfolios, which is something I'm looking forward to talking more about later on in the webinar as well.
Thank you both. And thank you, Whitney. This is a great segue for the great topics that we're going to be talking about today. So in addition to everything that Rachel and Whitney shared about V3, one of the key goals that we wanted to achieve with this update was to make the process of using and implementing Fitwel more efficient and streamlined. So we introduced the Smart Scorecard, which includes features that help you get your projects on the platform faster and support the documentation process, which we're going to be talking about in more depth now. But in the development of these features, we really spent a lot of time looking and examining the pain points of our users, which areas of the documentation process were the most difficult, or where users hit roadblocks, where we saw that there were avoidable mistakes that we can solve for. So we spoke directly to our users, we worked with our technical advisory, and we assessed how the solutions that we're presenting are really solving these problems and meeting the needs. So the features that we're going to go over today do not only just facilitate your documentation process, but they also reduce the time you spend during the review process. So that was another key area that we saw in our research, that we had some like roadblocks that our users hit. So we kind of solved for that as well. So our overarching goal is to really make sure that you and your teams are spending the least possible time demonstrating to us how your assets meet the requirements, and spending more time documenting more projects and adding more projects across your portfolios on the platform. So let's start with the registration process, the beginning of your process. And Rachel, can you talk a little bit about how the registration process became more streamlined with this update?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main changes we made with the V3 update was separating out project information from scorecard details and filtered out only the fields that are necessary and required to get your project on the platform. So project name, address, reducing the total number of fields the project team needs to infill to register a project and actually start working on that project. So we moved all the remaining fields from previous project information page to a new section that we integrated into the digital scorecard called Scorecard Details. So this section contains all the information we need to better understand the parameters of the project so that the certification team can review the project submission in context. This includes fields such as number of floors, number of occupants, whether the project has outdoor spaces or not, whether the team working on the project are consultants or not, in addition to some other fields, which I'm sure many of you who have used Fitwel know very well.
Thank you, Rachel. I really like the fact that users don't have to input all the information all at once. And thank you for our product team for making this happen, really. Whitney, can you talk more about how this like seemingly small change of separating out the fields really impacts our users practically?
Yes, of course. So I'm very happy with this change as well, because not everyone who registers projects we find is the same person who has all this asset information. This change cuts down on that time needed for coordination between teams to get their project registered on the platform and access the scorecard. So this enhanced process provides flexibility then to project teams to allow them to collect the project information while they're working on the project, as opposed to needing it up front in order to even just gain access to the digital scorecard. So separating out the project information from the scorecard details, which you can see here that Rachel touched on, further clarifies the process for these project teams, and they will have until the time of submission to ensure that this information is infilled and accurate.
That's great. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you both. Okay, so now the project is registered. Let's move into the documentation process. As I mentioned earlier, one of the most critical improvements that we've done with this update is to facilitate the documentation process. Rachel, back to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how we've reduced documentation effort with this update?
Definitely. And I agree. This is, I think, one of the most exciting and critical updates to assist our clients with the documentation of their projects. And our team has worked to simplify the documentation requirements in V3 to streamline it, make it more efficient. And one of those examples is integrating official statements. So our goal here was to make compliance documentation easier with integrating those statements directly on the platform, allowing you to simply check a box and eliminating the need for that extra documentation.
That's great. And just digging a little bit more into the official statements. Whitney, how does this update make the documentation process easier for our users?
Sure. One of the things we noticed during the review process on like the relationship management team and working very closely with clients is that at times some of the official statements were being rejected due to technicalities during the initial review process, such as not having it on letterhead or missing a signature. So by integrating these official statements into the platform, we reduce the ambiguity in the requirement and the need for further clarification during that review process. So this feature alone replaced the need for 45 official statements that would have otherwise required signatures, document upload beyond letterhead, uploaded individually, or as one massive document. So not only will this reduce the time required for gathering that documentation by eliminating the need for signatures for other team members, but it will also streamline the review process overall.
I love this, and it will reduce the time spent in the final review process as well. This is great. 45 documents is a lot of documents to reduce. Rachel, what other aspects are you excited about?
Yeah, so now speaking of some other things that we have kind of built into the platform, some calculators and performance tracking. So we now have built-in calculators that help us streamline that submission process with the goal of faster and more accurate project submissions and reviews. And so 22 of the V3 strategies have these numeric input fields to help validate both performance parameters, and then 19 strategies that have built-in calculators, as you can see here. And so we'll continue to build on that over time for applicable strategies that have calculations and things. Additionally, we've updated our policy templates and revamped these, allowing the flexibility to either submit signed policies using our templates and use them as a guide to update your own. And additionally, we've linked those policies directly in the strategy requirements on the platform, reducing the need to search for and download documents from the Help Center or the Fitwel website.
Yeah, this is great. So in V2.1, we used to just have the link that people need to copy paste into their browsers, and now we just embed it into the requirements. Sounds like an easy update, which will really facilitate the process for our users. So I do want to focus a little bit more on the built-in calculators and the performance tracking. Whitney, I'm going to go back to you on this one. So from your experience with our users, can you share some examples of how you see these features streamlining the documentation and the review process as well?
Definitely. So jumping back to like V2.1, previously teams had to calculate metrics using an Excel resource or on their own documentation, which sometimes led to discrepancies in things like occupant counts or confusion around these calculation methods. And then that would lead to additional time during the review process to verify these things between the occupant count and the calculation. So now these calculations being integrated into the platform, users have a consistent way to confirm that they're using the correct metrics and reduce errors. So for instance, strategies related to occupant count or bicycle parking are now easier to calculate accurately by just inputting those numbers into the fields on the platform.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you, Whitney. And also, as Rachel said, like this is just the start for us. We envision like we're going to continue to build on these enhancements. So as you're using these tools and these features, keep giving us your feedback and communicate with us where you see the value is and where the need from your end is. Let's keep going. Rachel, tell us more about other features that we have on the documentation side of things.
Sure. So I know we've talked about this on some of our other webinars before, but clear compliance pathway selection is a big update to the content structure. And so with Fitwel V3, we've made selecting compliance pathways easier. So each pathway is clearly defined, helping your team make accurate selections and document them correctly to minimize those errors. And so this will hopefully improve accuracy and reduce those errors, as you can clearly see just which compliance documentation you need for the pathway that you are pursuing. Another key update that we made was requirement tracking and search features. So we have added built-in checklists to the compliance documentation, allowing you to track requirements and monitor your submissions, prevent omissions, ensure that you have the required documentation. And we've also introduced these implementation categories for strategy sorting. which you can see here on the screen. So while Fitwel strategies will still be organized within sections, the strategies will also be categorized by these implementation categories to help project teams sort and assign documentation to relevant team members based on implementation or documentation type. And for those of you who joined us on our webinar in July, may recall, we introduced a search feature to the platform, which allows our users to search for strategies more easily rather than combing through the entire scorecard, looking through each section, things like that.
Yeah, this is great. And Rachel, you really just walked us through some of the features that I am personally more excited about. I really see a lot of value in these tools as checklists that make it easier for users to navigate the scorecards and navigate the content. There's a lot there. And so it's helpful to give them ways to really decide where to start, not necessarily going through the sections in that order. Whitney, from your perspective, I'm curious, where do you see value for these features for our users?
So also very excited about these features. I think removing some of the numbering has caused a little bit of confusion, and adding the search feature is huge. I think just one thing I wanted to point out in terms of navigation is that when you click on scorecard as a user, you can search all strategies within all sections, and also just scroll through all strategies. So just wanted to point that out as a little tip. But these, from a user standpoint, these checklists will help minimize errors and make it easier for project teams to spot these incomplete strategies prior to submission by using that filter feature. And then spotting these gaps in submissions prior to review will help cut down on comments received during initial review and avoid that back and forth during client response phase. So the search filters themselves will also make it easier to target specific strategies during the documentation process when working across a larger team, allowing you to search for and filter for the strategies that are most relevant to you as an individual across a larger project team. So you'll have the ability to utilize the platform as a tool to distribute work and respond to strategies more effectively as a team.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I really like these tools. And Rachel, going back to the compliance pathway selection, which is another very useful enhancement. From your opinion, how is this a big enhancement from V2.1? What problems is it solving for our clients from both content and documentation?
So we've streamlined the requirements and documentation for clarity and reducing submission errors, and clarifications instruct project teams how to meet and demonstrate the compliance with the strategy requirements. So by pairing that compliance documentation with the associated requirement, it helps project teams know exactly what pieces of documentation are needed to verify compliance for each requirement. And so by displaying compliance pathways for strategies as distinct options, as you can see here on the screen with option 1, tobacco-free indoor areas, and option 2, smoke-free indoor areas, project teams will be able to select the pathway option they're pursuing and submit the relevant compliance documentation for that pathway's requirements only, which is different than the way we had it in V2.1, where it was kind of all lumped together, and sometimes it was confusing for project teams to see clearly which documentation set they were supposed to be submitting.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Rachel. All right, so now we've gone through registration and documentation phases. Now we're getting to submission. So Whitney, can you talk us through improvements that we've made on the review side of things?
Yes, happy to. I'm very excited about this feature as well. So we've introduced a project timeline feature on the platform to better facilitate interactions between users and our Fitwel support team, specifically the certification team. So this new feature reflects your project's review timeline upon submission and is accessible to all project team members that have access to that project. So this helps ensure that all users know the important deadlines and don't need to look for submission emails that come through only upon submission. All team members can see the timeline, which will be updated to reflect the real dates each phase is completed. So you can see here, it reflects each phase of the process. And then it will also reflect here, the initial review was completed on August 22nd, 2024. So it will live update depending on, an initial review might take less time than projected, or you might return your client response in less time than the 4 weeks allocated to you. So then your final review would be updated accordingly, which is really great to have a live update here on the platform.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you, Whitney. And I'm gonna stick with you for a little bit longer. I know that the efficiencies that we've done are not only for features on the platform. So can you introduce our participants to updates that we've done on the resources as well? Any changes that we've made and where they can access them?
Yes, happy to walk through these resources. So users can now easily access relevant resources, guidelines, tools to support their certification efforts on both our Fitwel Help Center and the platform. So you can access them via either source depending on what phase you are in the process. And we've changed these resources a little bit to ensure that the information is the most accurate and up to date. The information that you're used to is still accessible to you, but the setup is slightly different. So I'll walk through one example. An example here is an updated resource on the Help Center that you can download. This is an example of what our V3 resources look like on the Help Center. And our scorecard checklist, which previously used to be called scorecard worksheets, they're available for download across all scorecards and can be used as an offline resource to facilitate client meetings or consultant coordination calls, for example. So the strategy requirements and compliance documentation can be found via hyperlinks. And I'll provide an example here. So this is an example of the checklist that we have available. And when you hover over a strategy, you can click on it and it'll open within our Help Center. And you can access the rationale, the requirements, all of the options within that strategy. And then at the very bottom, every strategy has compliance documentation, and you can see if they were different for design and build pathways, you would see both here. So this is a great tool to facilitate some of those client meetings that you might be having. And then just some other resources that are found on the Help Center include change logs, policies and protocols, and all scorecard requirements and compliance documentation. So same things you can find on the platform, but we wanted to give you two options in case it was prior to registration. And we're also always looking to develop new resources and want to be sure we're supporting all of you as our users to the best of our abilities. So your feedback is immensely valuable to us, and we always want to hear from you and love to implement your feedback to give you the best tools. So all the feedback we've received in terms of V3 and resources available are received and reviewed and influence any updates to our Fitwel resources and products, and then is communicated out to you as our users through a variety of different channels. And I'll let Rachel speak a little bit more to that feedback process.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. So in terms of the Help Center, we have links on the Help Center to submit V3 feedback through forms which come to us. And so the standard team reviews every piece of feedback that is received. And you can submit that feedback through the links on the forums directly on that form, or you can upload if you have, a bulk document with feedback on multiple strategies, things like that. And we'll be sharing regular updates on content revisions as we incorporate feedback and updating resources such as the change logs, and then documenting all content revisions at the top of those Help Center strategy articles with a summary. So I know Whitney just shared an example of one of those strategy articles when she clicked on the link directly from the checklist. But anytime we implement feedback or update a strategy with those revisions as we're incorporating feedback, we will ensure that we put a summary at the top of whatever those changes might be.
Yeah, thank you both. And I do like linking the content from the checklist directly, because any of the updates that we make are going to stay live. And so whenever you
Exactly.
whenever we have our users download the checklist, it doesn't really matter anymore, because previously I know sometimes that somebody downloads a checklist and it goes out of date over time. So it's nice now that the content is always live through the checklist. That's a really big enhancement. Thank you. Thank you both. And really would love to hear from the participants on the call which of these resources you find more useful if you've been using them to support your projects. So feel free to drop that in the chat. And we can also remind you all and share the link to the Help Center in the chat box. I don't know who can do that for us on the Fitwel team, but we can share the link to we can share the link to the Help Center with you all to just have access to that as well. Um, and going back to you, Whitney, really, in the recap, we when we started this conversation, Rachel introduced enhancements that we've made to the standard to support like a portfolio-wide adoption. So can you speak about that a little bit more, please?
Yes, of course. So we have an exciting new product called Fitwel Social Performance, or FSP for short, available that provides a validated benchmark for measuring the social impacts of real estate portfolios, assessing both individual assets and how they compare against peer portfolios, which gives you a very valuable data set. You may have attended one of our previous learning sessions and heard about the development of FSP. But as a refresher, FSP is powered by version 3 and take strategies from V3 standard that link social performance to financial outcomes. So because FSP is built using V3 strategies, there are efficiencies available to users who pursue Fitwel building or site certification who have FSP validated assets. So achieve strategies using FSP can be used when pursuing these full Fitwel certifications and are a great building block for your portfolio. And if you want to learn more about social performance, we can share a link to some of our previous webinars and resources we have available on the website and Help Center.
Yeah, thank you, Whitney, for the recap. And also, if you're interested in using FSB or want to find out more, like Whitney said, do reach out to us as well. We can help you. We can help guide you through the process of how to use this product and how to implement it on your portfolios. Okay, so we are at the end of our presentation. I would love to hear if anybody on the call has any questions. In the meantime, want to remind you that the V3 standard is still in comment period, and we would love to hear your feedback as you start registering your projects and using the tools that we just shared, implementing the content on your projects. Please share your feedback, feedback and your experience with us. You can use this QR code on the screen as Rachel mentioned earlier. It will lead you to the forums where we can collect your feedback and integrate it into our process. I'm gonna give it a few seconds to see if we have any questions. All right, I guess not. Well, hopefully everyone found this webinar helpful. Rachel and Whitney, thank you both for your time today and for going through all these features. And we will follow up with a recording of the webinar and any additional information we have. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Bye.